Why do we long for exactly what has the power to wound us? And what if the person you feel the strongest pull toward is in truth the cruelest reflection of your oldest wound? And what if that love that freezes your body and ignites your soul is nothing but the disguise of trauma trying to resolve itself? Until you bring it to awareness, the unconscious will keep steering your life, and you will call it destiny. That phrase from Carl Jung is not advice, it is a warning, a lucid whisper rising from the depths of the psyche, a reminder that what we call passion may actually be the desperate movement of the soul struggling to rewrite itself. We have all been there, lying awake in the middle of the night, the glow of the phone on our face, waiting for a message that never comes, replaying every word, every touch, every silence, as if the answer were hidden in the fragments. But what we are trying to understand is not the other person. It is why that absence hurts so deeply, why the void feels so intimate, almost like home, and above all, why it seems like love. Jung does not offer us comfort, he offers us mirrors, and what we see in them is often disturbing. Desire, according to him, is not just a chemical spark nor a hormonal dance. It is a summons from the unconscious. It is the anima or the animus, inner figures shaped by the very parts of ourselves we reject, projected outward in search of wholeness. Yet that search so often becomes a trap. The darkest truth about sexual attraction is not that it is too strong, but that it is too precise. With terrifying accuracy, it locates the fracture in your soul and slips through. So often we fall in love not with who stands before us, but with someone who unknowingly carries the traits of what we once lacked. We do not love the other. We love the possibility of rescuing the denied part of ourselves. And that may look like love, but in truth, it is only a wounded child trying to fix a broken story with borrowed pieces. What you felt as chemistry may only have been your trauma whispering, "This time, it will finally work." But will it really? Throughout this journey, we will descend with you into that abyss, without rails, without light at the tunnel's end. Because the only exit lies in staring directly into the darkness within, and finally grasping that desire does not always point toward love. Sometimes it points toward captivity. So close your eyes for a moment, breathe. Recall the person who once attracted you the most. Now ask yourself, was that truly love? Or was it the echo of your past screaming for recognition? Have you wondered why some gazes cut through you like a knife, while others barely graze? Why certain people drive you mad in minutes, while others, perhaps far more suitable, barely spark your interest? And most disturbing, why are we so often drawn to those who cannot love us, or worse, to those who can destroy us? There is a dangerous illusion in modern life, the belief that desire is a trustworthy compass, that where there is fire, there is truth. But Jung would say, where there is fire, there is shadow burning. Desire, especially the kind that paralyzes, consumes, and blinds, is rarely pure. Almost always it is a symptom, a cry of the soul seeking completion, even if that means repeating precisely what once wounded it. Picture this. You enter a crowded place. Dozens of people surround you. Some greet you warmly, others hardly notice. Then suddenly, one person's eyes meet yours, and something in you shifts. Your body tenses, your heart races. You try to act natural, but you feel pulled by something greater than your will. The name of that force is not love, but recognition. You recognize in that look something familiar, a known absence, a specific kind of coldness, distance, or calculated seduction. You do not fall for the person who sees you. You fall for the one who awakens in you a buried memory of what was missing. Jung called this projection. It is when the psyche, unnoticed, casts upon another all that is repressed within, our voids, hidden desires, unresolved traumas. We believe we are seeing them, when in truth we are only seeing ourselves, or rather, what is missing in us. That is why the wrong person can feel so right, because they reflect the precise missing piece of our emotional puzzle, even if what they ultimately bring is pain. So ask yourself, is your longing truly for them, or for the chance to finally feel chosen by what once ignored you? These dynamics are not obvious. They move in the shadows. You may say you want someone gentle, yet you are drawn to the one who makes you anxious. You may claim you want peace, yet only feel passion in chaos. Not because you are lying, but because your soul is unconsciously trying to rewrite the script. And that is where desire becomes a trap. Jung reminds us the unconscious has no sense of humor. It does not forget, it does not forgive, it does not simplify. It repeats. It repeats faces, patterns, sensations, until the pain becomes conscious or eternal. So no, what draws you is not always love. Sometimes it is karma. And karma, as Jung explained, is not punishment. It is repetition until you learn. Understand this. Emotionally healthy people do not ignite hurricanes within you. They do not leave you on edge. They do not create games. They do not fuel your anxiety. Do you know why? Because they do not activate your wound. And if your inner compass is broken, you will mistake that for boredom. You will think something is missing, but what is missing is not passion. It is the chaos you once learned to call love. That is where most lose themselves. Because passion born of trauma is addictive. It creates a dance of expectation and rejection, of ecstasy and abandonment. And if your nervous system was trained by pain, you will call that home. You may even say, "But I like intense relationships." Perhaps, but what you call intensity may only be desperation wearing perfume. So let me ask you gently, but firmly, whom do you love and why? Do not give me a name, give me the feeling. Is it calm or is it storm? Is it safety or pursuit? Do you feel seen or hunted? Jung invites us to look not only at who we desire, but at what within us is doing the desiring. Because if it is fear, emptiness, or the urge to prove something to someone long gone, then it is not love. It is a scream. And screams do not build homes. They only echo. Now understand this clearly. The most dangerous enemy is not outside, but within your own mind. That impulse that makes you explode. That anxiety that paralyzes. That attachment that weakens you. All of it follows a pattern. And unless you rebuild the mental model behind it, it will repeat again and again. But there is a way to change the foundation. With cold logic, with strategic awareness, with exercises in emotional retraining. There is something deeply unsettling about love, something beyond the body, the look, the touch. Because sometimes what you feel does not come from the person before you, but from an older, silent, darker place. A place where your soul projected what it once lost. Jung believed our psyche is inhabited by archetypal figures, deep structures that shape not only how we think, but how we love. Among them, two are especially dangerous when it comes to desire: anima and animus. The anima represents the unconscious feminine within man, and the animus in woman, the masculine dwelling in shadow. But do not confuse this with biological gender, for it is something far deeper. It is about what was repressed, denied, or never allowed to grow within you. Imagine this, a man who since childhood was taught to be rational, strong, and untouchable. Sensitivity, affection, surrender, all of that was treated as weakness. Those qualities never vanished. They were only pushed into the basement of the psyche, and there, in the darkness, they took form. An imaginary woman, emotionally charged, beautiful, and full of symbolism. That is the anima. And when that man meets someone who mirrors her in the outer world, he gets lost. It is not her he loves. It is what she represents, the part of himself he never could embody. And in that longing, he is not seeking connection. He is seeking completion. The same occurs with women. They grew up hearing they had to be sweet, understanding, modest, power, anger, firmness. Those impulses were not welcomed. So the animus is shaped, an idealized masculine figure, confident, dominant. And when a man appears carrying that energy, she does not think, she surrenders. But here lies the danger. What is projected is not seen clearly. It is idealized, it is romanticized, it is turned into an idol, even when it should serve as a warning. Do you understand now why so many overwhelming passions have that taste of enchantment, of illusion? Because it is not about the other, it is about you, about a hidden fragment of your soul, finally reflected like in a dark mirror. And what happens when you fall in love with a mirror? You see yourself, or more precisely, you see what you never had the chance to become. Yet there is an even deeper figure in this psychological dance, the shadow. The shadow is everything you refuse in yourself, everything denied, rejected, condemned. Your secret fantasies, your restrained anger, your envy, your fear, your misunderstood eroticism, all that you locked away in a cage just to survive morality, culture, family. But the cage is not secure, only hidden. And at some point, the shadow escapes, often escaping as desire, as that impulse you cannot explain, that attraction for someone who goes against everything you claim to want. That person carries, without knowing it, a fragment of your shadow. And that is why you are drawn, why you are consumed. Jung said, "We do not relate to people, but to unconscious contents. And until you know your shadow, you will remain its slave. You will love what destroys you, desire what imprisons you, call destiny what is nothing more than psychic programming." But there is something even more unsettling. Imagine someone who, instead of being lived by their shadow, learns to control it, to manipulate it, to use it. That person becomes dangerous, not because of malice, but because of awareness. They perceive what attracts you. They know how to summon your ghosts, and consciously or not, they turn into the embodiment of your anima or your animus just to capture you. They become exactly what you seek to feel complete, and then they possess you. That is the darkest point of Jungian theory of attraction. You do not fall in love with the one you love. You fall in love with the one who embodies your unconscious. And if that person desires, they can dominate you entirely, without even raising their voice. Think of it. How many times have you longed for someone who made no sense, who caused you pain, yet still fascinated you, who pushed you away and still pulled you back? Perhaps it was never love, perhaps it was your shadow guiding you. And if that were true, if it was the most hidden part of you that chooses who you are drawn to, then desire is not free, it is conditioned. But there is a path out. Jung calls us toward individuation, the process of becoming whole, of recognizing anima and animus within, of looking at the shadow without fear, of integrating what was once denied. When that happens, something shifts. You stop searching in others for what you lack. You stop falling for phantoms and begin to love real people with flaws, but also with presence. You realize love is not about completion. It is about overflow. And desire, when born from integration, is no longer compulsion. It is choice. Yet to arrive there, you must descend. Descend into the very parts you avoided most. Speak with the ghosts that whisper your darkest cravings, and instead of repressing them, understand them. For only the one who knows their shadow can truly love in the light. And perhaps, only perhaps, real pleasure is not in being desired, but in finally recognizing yourself as whole, without needing to dissolve in another. There is a peculiar silence that takes over the body after the one you love departs. A silence not of surprise, but of recognition, as if something in you knew from the very beginning that ending was already written. And still, you stayed. How many times have you found yourself trapped in relationships that hurt but never release? How many times has your longing screamed for someone who only knew how to deny you? You say it is love, that it is passion, that it is intense, but Jung would have given it another name: emotional repetition. You are not loving the person. You are trying to win an ancient war with a new soldier. The conscious mind believes it is choosing, but the soul is repeating, rewriting scenes, changing the actors, but keeping the same script. Jung said that until the unconscious becomes conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And that is exactly what happens in what he named a complex, an emotional nucleus, often traumatic, that activates like a magnet, an inner code screaming, "Find someone who will make me relive this, but with a different ending." But the ending rarely changes, because whoever still acts from the wound can only choose through the eyes of the child who suffered. Do you understand what this means? That the love that destroys you may not be an error. It may be a misguided attempt at healing, unconscious, tragic. And this does not only happen to men. How many women keep falling in love with inaccessible men? Men who are thrilling, intense, dominant, yet cold. Men who flatter with the same intensity they ignore, who ignite the fire and then leave the room in darkness. These women say, "I don't know why I always choose the wrong ones. The good ones bore me. I like the difficult ones." But behind that, there is a girl who learned that love must be conquered, that she must be good, sensual, smart, incredible, to deserve attention. A girl who perhaps grew up with a father who gave affection only when she excelled, or who simply was never present. So today, that woman is not seeking affection. She is seeking redemption. She is seeking to prove she can be loved by someone who refuses, someone who makes her feel like in childhood. That is called love. But it is not love. It is trauma, dressed as romance. And what makes it more cruel is that the body joins the game. The chemistry responds, desire ignites, butterflies appear, but they come from the empty stomach of affection. You think it is connection, but it is deprivation, recognizing a pattern. When trauma is not healed, it programs your radar, and your radar will guide you straight toward whoever can recreate your pain with the unconscious hope that this time it will be different. But it rarely is, because you are still trying to heal with the very poison that once made you sick. Jung called this the compulsion to repeat, a force that blindly pushes us to relive the same scripts, the same impossible loves, the same abusive dynamics, the same illusions, as if every new encounter were in fact a desperate attempt to rewrite the ending of a story already closed. And as long as you do not see this, you will continue confusing pain with intensity. You will continue to call soulmate the one who is nothing more than the reflection of an old ghost. Yet there is a way out, and it does not begin outside. It does not begin by changing partners. It begins by turning inward with courage, with rawness, with brutal honesty. You need to ask yourself, does this desire come from healing or from hunger? Do I want this person, or do I only want what is represented? Am I loving, or am I simply trying to solve something that remained open in childhood? Those questions are not easy. They shake the ground beneath you. But they also reveal the doorway. Because real love, the one that frees, the one that builds, the one that warms, does not emerge from lack. It is born from presence, from awareness. And when you love from awareness, desire is no longer prison. It is selection. It is encounter. It is light, even if it is deep. You no longer need to repeat the past. You can honor it, listen to it, heal it, and then choose differently. Not because you are tired of pain, but because you finally understood it was never love. It was only a cry for healing. And now perhaps you are ready to listen. Not all seduction comes from love. Sometimes it is born from fear. Sometimes it is a golden armor, shining, sensual, and yet still armor. Because when someone discovers they can control the other through desire, tenderness yields its place to strategy, and what is called romance becomes theater, a game between broken mirrors. Jung showed us that seduction is not always spontaneous. It can be an unconscious choreography of defense, a way of controlling the other before being hurt. And so many learn that to be noticed, they must shine, be desirable, irresistible, because simply being themselves was never enough. Later, their sensuality becomes weapon. They discover that by becoming object of desire, they control the affection once missing. But it is not love they seek. It is control. It is domination. It is not to depend on anyone, but to make everyone depend on them. They do not want to be loved. They want to be needed, to have the other kneel emotionally, so that never again will they be the rejected child. And the other feels the charm, the magnetism, the consuming desire. But what is seen is not the real person, only projection of one's own lack, of what was repressed, of shelter never found. Without knowing, one embodies the archetype the other has been waiting for all life. Yet the real being carries wounds, abysses, pain. And thus the encounter turns into spectacle. One desires as if it were salvation. The other manipulates as if it were revenge. And what could be love becomes war. There are also those who learn that power comes from absence, that the more distant they are, the more desired they become. They confuse coldness with strength, use silence as weapon, feed insecurity with measured doses of attention, just enough to keep dependence alive. They do not want a partner, they want reflection, validation, someone to make them feel like gods, because deep down, they remain unseen children, never validated in essence, and now needing idolatry. When they meet someone hungry for affection, who mistakes rejection for challenge, they know exactly what to do. They give love at first, appear present, intense, hypnotic, but once the other surrenders, they vanish or grow cold. The cycle repeats. One is hooked on domination, the other on hope. Love becomes performance, intimacy, illusion. Jung would call this the trap of the unconscious, a game where each wears the mask of the other, not from malice, but from pain. And the more pain lies behind seduction, the stronger it becomes, because desire born of the wound sounds louder than real love. And you listening now, how many times have you found yourself in that dance? How many times did you long for someone who made you feel small? How many times did you mistake coldness for depth? How many times believed that the harder someone was to conquer, the more special it must be? But here is an uncomfortable truth. Love is not a prize, it is presence. And any bond that needs games to stay alive was born, already dying. Listen carefully. There are people who do not know how to love. They only know how to retain, to seduce, to dominate. But to love, no. Because love demands vulnerability. And for those who grew in hostile environments, being vulnerable is dangerous. That is why many prefer to control rather than love. They prefer to keep you on the tightrope of desire rather than allow you to see who they really are. And if you too grew up without safe love, you will mistake this game for passion. You will think that emotional highs and lows are signs of connection, but it is only adrenaline, addiction, trauma disguised as romance. So observe closely who attracts you. Do they truly see you, or do they use you as mirror? Do they love you, or only love the power they hold over you? And more important, do you love them, or are you only fighting an old battle that never began in this relationship? Do not blame yourself if you were ever caught in that cycle. Almost everyone has been. What matters is what you do with awareness. Seduction is not the problem. But when it is used as disguise for lack or as weapon of revenge, it ceases to be dance and becomes prison. Real intimacy begins when the game ends, when you no longer need to be desired to feel worthy, when you no longer need to manipulate to feel loved. And maybe the love you seek only appears when masks fall, when you stop performing, when you look at someone not to win, but simply to be. Jung taught that the meeting of two personalities is like contact of two chemical substances. If there is reaction, both are transformed. But in the game of seduction, no one transforms, only binds, and love dies in silence, suffocated by ego. If you want to love truly, release control, release the need to seduce, and see what remains. If connection still lives, then perhaps love has finally arrived. True love begins where need ends, and conscious desire begins where the shadow is embraced. Have you ever asked what changes when one stops seeking a partner to complete them and finally begins to find themselves? When desire is no longer the cry of emptiness, but the invitation of presence. Most people never love consciously. They desire, they need, they beg, they mold themselves. But to love, to truly love, requires something frightening. Inner freedom. Jung knew this. That is why he never romanticized passion. He dismantled it. For him, real love is only possible after individuation, a long and often painful process where you stop projecting onto the other what you lack and begin to become whole. At that moment, desire changes its color, ceases to be prison to become choice, ceases to be lack to turn into celebration. But how to reach that point? First, you need to accept that parts of you still govern silently. The shadow, the trauma, the anima, the animus, the complexes, all acting unseen, choosing for you, desiring for you. Do you think you are loving someone? Perhaps you are only seeking a lap. Perhaps you are trying to rescue the mother who did not hold you, the father who did not see you, the adolescence that hurt you, the childhood that marked you. Do you believe you are in control? It is your story that drives while you sit as passenger. That is why so many relationships feel like repeated films with new actors. Because you change person, but not pattern, not script, not wound. Until that is faced, desire remains compulsion. You will call it chemistry, but it is only programming. You will call it destiny, but it is only trauma calling your name. But at this point of the path, something opens. Awareness comes, and when it arrives, everything changes. You begin to see beyond charm, beyond shiver, beyond magnetic presence. You look and ask, does this person calm me or ignite my anxiety? Do I want them or only what they represent? Does this desire arise from fullness or from lack? These are not romantic questions. They are surgical ones. And precisely for that reason, they save. Because desire born of awareness is not uncontrolled fire. It is steady warmth. It does not burn. It holds. True love is not the one that pulls the ground from under you. It is the one that teaches you to walk barefoot. It shows you that you no longer need to chase after someone who cannot see you. You only need to see yourself. That is liberation. And it does not come overnight. It arrives when you stop romanticizing your pain, when you realize that devastating passion was only echo of an open wound, that the inexplicable bond was in fact perfectly explainable. All it takes is to look at your story. Jung said the goal of life is not happiness, but the realization of the self. And the self is not realized by being half, but by becoming whole. That means to stop cutting yourself to fit into someone else's desire. It means to accept your shadows and instead of projecting them, embrace them. It means to stop searching for soulmates and start becoming your own soul complete. Do you want to know if you are ready to love truly? Then observe how you deal with solitude, because one who cannot be with oneself will use the other as anesthetic, and every anesthetic fades, but the addiction remains. To love consciously is to be whole. It is to desire, yes, but without need. It is to give, yes, but without vanishing. And to many that may sound boring, but what about passion, and butterflies, and madness? Let me tell you something that may sound strange. Peace is also exciting, only that your body must be re-educated. For if you lived in war, calm feels like death. But it is not. It is life. New life. The right one may not give you butterflies, but will let you breathe, will let you sleep in peace, will let you laugh without fear, will look at you, and you will recognize yourself, not as half waiting to be filled, but as someone finally enough. That is desire that chooses. That is desire that does not imprison. And the most beautiful thing, that desire is silent. It does not shout, does not demand, does not beg. It simply is. Because when you find yourself, the other ceases to be crutch and becomes companion, and then love may flourish. In the end, perhaps the love we seek was never in the other. It was in the gaze we have not yet learned to cast upon ourselves, because what you call attraction is often only echo of an inherited emptiness, lived, ignored, but never truly understood. Sexual attraction, that force that moves us, blinds us, consumes us, is not simple. It is the stage where our shadows dance. It is the whisper of unresolved childhood. It is so often trauma saying, "Let us try again," but this time with a different body. Jung did not want you to run from love. He wanted you to see it unveiled, without projection, without anesthesia. He wanted you to recognize that what binds you to the other is the part of you still chained to your story. And that is why the real encounter does not happen when two halves complete each other, but when two wholes recognize each other. Desire only becomes sacred when it ceases to be escape and becomes choice. When you look at someone and instead of thinking, "Save me," you say, "I choose you, but I also have myself." So next time your heart races, your body trembles, your mind starts to fantasize, stop, breathe, ask yourself, is this love or only my wound feeling hope? Healing does not happen when we find the right love. Healing happens when we stop choosing love with the wrong part of ourselves. This reflection was born from that awakening, born from the wish to speak, as with an old friend late at night between silence and truth. Because many of us are tired of repeating the same cycles, of loving the same face under different names, of calling destiny what is only unresolved emotional pattern. If this message resonated with you and you feel ready to break free from repeating old patterns, subscribe now and activate the notification bell so you won't miss the next step on this journey toward conscious love and inner freedom. Have you ever felt that someone entered your life at the exact moment you needed them most, so perfectly timed that it seemed like the universe itself had orchestrated every detail in secret, like there was a hidden hand behind the curtain, gently guiding every event, every coincidence, until your paths finally crossed? It didn't feel like chance. It didn't feel like luck. It felt like something far deeper, something almost sacred. Carl Jung once called it synchronicity, the mysterious alignment of events that seem connected, even though there's no obvious reason why. It's that indescribable sensation that everything, time, space, energy, has conspired to bring two souls together, even when everything else pointed in a different direction. And when that moment arrives, you don't need evidence. You don't need to analyze it or search for proof. You just know. You feel it. Deep in your gut, in your chest. The stillness between words. There's a current of energy between the two of you, subtle but undeniable, electric and alive. It's not logical, but it's real. It defies explanation, yet you can't dismiss it. It's as if fate has finally decided to whisper in your ear, not with words, but with signs. Gentle, quiet signs that only make sense to you. But these aren't the kind of signs that scream. They're not bright billboards or dramatic twists in a movie. They're intimate, delicate, a passing thought of them just before they call. A song that plays in the background with lyrics that somehow mirror your last conversation. A dream shared without knowing it on the same night, about the same place. A look you exchange that says everything without needing a single word. Or that impossible encounter, years after you last spoke, in the most unexpected corner of the world. A place neither of you should have been, but somehow you both were. In that instant, everything pauses, and somehow it all makes sense. These moments are like breadcrumbs scattered across the map of your life, only visible when you stop looking with your eyes and start listening with your heart. And as you follow them, you begin to understand that some meetings are not random at all. They're reminders, echoes, pieces of a greater story that's still unfolding. You start to believe that maybe, just maybe, there are no accidents, that maybe some connections are written long before our bodies ever meet. You begin to feel that certain people come into your life not just to stay or to leave, but to awaken something dormant inside you, to help you remember who you are beneath the noise, beneath the doubt, to mirror back the parts of yourself you'd forgotten. With them, time bends. Minutes feel like lifetimes. Hours disappear in conversation, and even silence becomes a language. It's not just about falling in love. It's about recognition. As if your soul stands up and says, "There you are. I've been waiting for you." And even if that connection is brief, even if it fades or transforms or never quite becomes what you imagined, it still leaves a mark. It still matters. Because once you've felt a connection like that, something in you shifts forever. You start to see life differently. You start to trust in timing, in flow, in the unseen paths that bring people together. You become more open to mystery, to wonder, to the idea that perhaps the universe is not silent, but constantly speaking to you in ways you're only just beginning to understand. So the next time you feel it, that pull, that spark, that inexplicable sense of familiarity with someone you barely know, don't rush to explain it away. Don't silence the voice inside you that says, "This means something." Let yourself believe in the unseen. Let yourself imagine that there's more to life than meets the eye. Because sometimes the most important meetings happen not when we're searching, but when we're ready. And sometimes, just sometimes, the universe brings you exactly who you need, at the exact moment you need them. And no, it's not a coincidence. It never was. Jung didn't speak of destiny as some magical force that writes our story without our consent. He saw it as the result of a dance between our unconscious and the universe. He called it the self, the totality of who we are beyond the ego, always seeking wholeness, striving for integration. And when someone shows up to help in that process, it's because their soul is somehow connected to yours. That's when everything starts to feel inevitable, not by obligation, but by resonance. Two people coming from different paths, carrying similar wounds, mirroring desires, and sharing the same hunger to make sense of life's mystery. And in that encounter, the real signs begin to emerge. It's not just chemistry, not merely attraction, it's the strange sensation that this person sees parts of you even you had forgotten. And in them, you recognize something that reminds you of yourself, but shaped differently, more fragile, or maybe more pure. It's as if your shadows and theirs acknowledge each other. And that's where Jung's ideas become powerful. When two unconscious minds meet, they don't greet, they expose. You begin acting in ways you can't fully explain. Your emotions intensify, your dreams transform. You feel something stirring within. That's one of the clearest signs, inner movement. Because when destiny wants to bring two people together, it doesn't begin with external events. It begins by shaking their inner world. Suddenly, what you used to avoid becomes impossible to ignore. And then, something fascinating happens. Symbols appear. Jung spoke of the symbolic language of the soul. And if you're paying attention, you'll start to notice it. Maybe there's a number you both constantly see. Maybe a particular song keeps resurfacing in moments that seem oddly meaningful. Or an object appears, seemingly unimportant, yet it becomes a thread that ties your stories together. None of this is random. It's your unconscious speaking to you, through the world. It's life itself whispering, notice, feel, connect. But these signs don't appear just to decorate a love story. They appear to initiate transformation. Because when destiny aims to unite two people, it's not searching for comfort, it's demanding growth. And that's why these meetings are often laced with friction, with challenge, with tests. The other is not there to simply bring you pleasure, but to push you toward evolution. And here's another powerful sign: resistance. Because when the soul recognizes a meaningful connection, the ego panics, doubts arise, fears emerge, contradictions surface. You move closer, only to pull away again. You feel you can't be without them, yet you can't fully surrender either. That's not weakness. It's the reflection of the inner war between your desire to grow and your fear of what's unknown. Jung understood this. The soul longs for integration, but the ego fears its own dissolution. And in the middle of that confusion, destiny keeps working. Things continue to happen, moments where it seems like everything's over, yet something inexplicable brings you back. An unexpected message, a ridiculous coincidence, a lingering sense that something is still unfinished and that something isn't random. It's the echo of a story that began long before. Jung believed many relationships are guided by archetypes, ancient figures that live in our collective unconscious. The lover, the wise one, the wounded child, the warrior, the mother. And when you meet someone who activates one of those archetypes in you, you're not just living a relationship, you're enacting something ancient, a deep, timeless part of humanity. That's why it feels so intense. Because it's not just your story, it's our story, humanity's story. And when that intensity doesn't fade over time, when instead it grows with each encounter, with each pause, with each glance that needs no explanation, that's another sign. Time doesn't weaken the bond, it deepens it, because it's not fed by the external or the superficial. It's rooted in the soul, where memory lives and ego forgets. And the more you try to ignore those signs, the louder they become. Because destiny doesn't shout, it whispers. But if you won't listen, it begins to push. And if you still resist, then it shakes. Sometimes through pain, sometimes through loss. Because there are people you simply cannot let go. Not because you're weak, but because there's still something left unsaid, something not yet understood, something waiting to be lived. And it's in those moments that a strange feeling takes hold. You feel guided, not by logic, not by emotion, but by some silent certainty, as if one part of you already knows the way, even if another still hesitates. That is intuition. Jung valued it deeply, not as a primitive instinct, but as the expression of unconscious wisdom. Intuition doesn't tell you what you want to hear. It tells you what you need to know. And when that voice persists, when every fiber in your body pulls you towards someone, despite fear, doubt, and all the barriers, that's when you have to stop and ask yourself, what if this isn't just another connection? What if this is something sacred? What if this person came to reveal a part of me I've never dared to face? And as you begin to explore that thought, you realize this bond isn't made of sweet words or flawless moments. It's held together by a force that defies logic, one that survives distance, time, and silence. Because when destiny sets something in motion for you, it doesn't matter how much you try to forget, avoid, or replace it. Something keeps returning. Not to haunt you, but to remind you of who you truly are when you're with that person. What's most surprising is that this connection rarely arrives under perfect conditions. Sometimes you're in another country, another relationship, or another phase of life, and yet something unseen keeps linking you. Jung described it as the unconscious longing to be whole, because the other isn't just there to walk beside you. They're there to expose your emptiness, your resistance, your deepest fears. And through that mirror, you're invited to grow. That's when another layer of the encounter begins, the sacred conflict. It's not about pointless arguments, but about those frictions that force you to look inward. They make you question, shake your comfort zone, reopen old wounds, not because that person wants to hurt you, but because they unknowingly trigger what's been hidden. And though it hurts, it also frees you, because what stays unseen can never be healed. Then you realize that life doesn't hand you the perfect relationship. It gives you the one you need in order to grow, to awaken, to become whole. Jung used to say that the soul doesn't seek what is easy, it seeks what is true. And the truth can be beautiful, but it always changes you. Even when you try to walk away, convincing yourself it's better to move on and not look back. something deep within still resists. It's not because you're clinging, but because there's a connection that hasn't fully closed yet, a lesson that hasn't finished teaching you what it came to show. It's not about holding on to the other person. It's about listening to what that bond is still asking of you. Maybe it's not about being together now. Maybe it's about remembering or letting go in a more conscious way. But it's never meaningless. And that's where synchronicity returns. Suddenly, they call you exactly when you need them most. Or you dream of them just before they reach out. Or you see something on the street that reminds you of them so clearly, so deeply, that you simply can't ignore it. And the strangest part is, it keeps happening. Jung explained this as manifestations of the unconscious through symbols projected onto reality. And if you keep seeing it over and over, it's not chance, it's a message. A message that doesn't come from someone else, but from you. From that part of you that still wants to speak, that still has something to express, something to be embraced. Because that connection, beyond what it looks like, serves a purpose to help you come back to yourself. That's where the real power lies. You don't need the other person to change or for things to go exactly how you imagined. What you need is the willingness to see the deeper meaning behind the encounter. When you're open to that, everything shifts. You stop resisting uncertainty. You begin to observe, to feel without trying to explain it all, to live in the present without obsessing over what's ahead. Because when destiny moves, it doesn't move at your pace, it moves at the soul's rhythm. And the soul doesn't rush. The soul waits, it recognizes, it trusts. And in that waiting, there's no passivity, there's transformation. You're not waiting for the other person. You're uncovering who you are now, that they've awakened something that was asleep. And that's priceless, because the more you understand yourself, the clearer the meaning of that encounter becomes. And interestingly, the more you grow, the more the relationship shifts. It either transforms, purifies, or closes with gratitude, but it never stays the same. And then comes another sign that destiny is at work. Connection isn't confined to the physical realm. You don't have to speak every day. You don't need to touch, see, or possess. It's a connection that goes beyond the senses, an intuition that surfaces in crucial moments, an inner whisper that tells you that person is somehow still present, even if they're far. It feels as if a part of you carries them within. Jung spoke of the anima and animus, the internal expressions of the feminine and masculine in every human being. And when someone arrives embodying that energy your soul has been quietly seeking, something awakens. It's more than external attraction. It's the mirror of a hidden part of you, finally being brought to light. That's why the bond feels so deep. You're not just falling for another person, you're falling for what they awaken in you. And that changes everything, because it's no longer about filling empty spaces. It's about sharing from wholeness, about recognizing each other through differences, about walking together with no rigid expectations, but with full presence. When destiny is at play, there's no rush, there's no need to control, just to remain open. That openness isn't blind surrender. It's about opening your heart without losing yourself. It's listening to signs without clinging. It's choosing to trust, even when the path is unclear. Because if destiny truly wants you together, no force will ever be strong enough to pull you apart. But in the meantime, every experience, every silence, every encounter holds a reason, and you have the power to either tune in or turn away. When you realize that destiny is never in a rush, something within you begins to soften. You stop chasing certainties and begin paying closer attention to what moves inside you whenever that person crosses your thoughts, your memories, or even your path. Because that's where the true language of destiny starts to reveal itself, not just through what unfolds between you two, but through what awakens in you because of the connection. And the most intriguing part is that the more you dive into your inner world, the clearer the mirror becomes that this person reflects. It's almost as if they carry the key to a door you hadn't dared open in years, a door behind which lives your rawest self, both real and fragile. And when you finally open that door, you don't just see them differently, you see yourself from a deeper, more sincere place. That's why certain connections ache, even when they haven't entirely ended, because they touch something so personal, so essential, that you simply can't return to who you were before feeling it. It doesn't matter if you spent little or much time together. What truly matters is the magnitude of the impact. And that impact isn't measured by time, but by depth. If it stirs you in such a way, if it reconfigures your inner world, if it brings to life parts of you that had been dormant, then yes, it meant something. But destiny isn't always gentle. Sometimes, for two souls to truly meet, they must part first. Because the real union isn't physical, it's energetic. And if one of them isn't ready, the universe creates space, not as punishment, but as protection. When love comes too soon, it can't bloom, it burns out. And destiny knows this. That's why, even in separation, there is still guidance. What's fascinating is that even from afar, some people remain, still dreaming of you, still feeling you, still slipping into your thoughts without warning. And you too sense them in ways you can't explain. It's not obsession. It's not dependency. It's the energetic echo of a connection left unresolved, a lesson not yet fully learned. And so, the real work is not about chasing after someone else, but turning inward, asking yourself what part of you longs to be seen, acknowledged, brought into wholeness. Jung spoke of individuation as the path to becoming complete, and often that journey is triggered by the presence of a meaningful relationship because the other acts as a mirror, reflecting all you've buried. That is what makes it powerful. You don't always fall for who you see, but for what they awaken in your soul. Maybe it's your freedom. Maybe it's the part of you you've forgotten. Maybe it's your deepest wound. But whatever it is, it's never random. There's a purpose, and once you see that purpose clearly, without clinging, without demand, without needing to hold on, everything begins to shift. Because then, you stop looking for someone to complete you. You honor them for what they revealed. You bless them for what they stirred within. And from there, if reunion is meant to happen, it will. If not, the connection still served its role. It brought you back to yourself. This is where destiny stops being romantic and becomes a path of transformation. It's not here to deliver fairy tale endings. It's here to confront you, to guide you, to expose what your ego tried to ignore. And it uses love to do it, but not sweet, comfortable love. It's the kind that changes you, breaks illusions, strips away masks, because only then can you truly evolve. Yes, there are signs, there always are, but not all of them are gentle. Some hurt, some make you uncomfortable, some leave you without answers, yet all of them serve a purpose, to reveal you. Because when you're with the person destiny placed in your path to help you grow, nothing feels random. Everything echoes in your soul. Everything leaves a trace. Sometimes that bond makes you stop. Sometimes it leads you in a new direction. Sometimes it forces you to choose yourself for the very first time, because there are connections that don't come to give you what you want, but to show you what you're truly worth. And even if you don't understand it at the time, eventually you'll be thankful, because everything made sense, even if it once felt like chaos. And there's something else. When destiny wants two souls to meet, it doesn't need to scream it. It whispers through synchronies, so small, yet so powerful, in sudden flashes of clarity, in feelings you can't quite explain, but that flood you completely, in that deep sense of familiarity, as if you've known them forever, even if it's the very first time you meet, as if your soul remembers something your body still doesn't understand. And if that happens, don't ignore it. Don't deny what you feel. Don't try to force answers. Just pay attention. See if something repeats. If a door opens without effort. If the universe moves in strange ways to bring you closer. Then it's no longer about logic. It's about allowing. Because when the soul is ready, destiny never misses. Eventually, you realize that beyond everything, the signals, the love, the distance, the closeness, what truly matters is how that bond transformed you. If that person came into your life to wake you up, to shake your foundations, to show you parts of yourself you hadn't wanted to see, then that meeting was sacred. It was destiny, not because of what you built with them, but because of what you built within yourself, through them. Some loves aren't meant to stay, yet they remain because they've marked your soul. There are people who, even if no longer physically near, still live inside your story, your growth, your awakening. And maybe, just maybe, fate never intended for them to cling, but to be seen, to be honored for what was shared, and to be ready for whatever might come. If this message resonated with you, if you felt that spark of truth in every word, I invite you to leave a comment sharing your story. Perhaps, on the other side of the world, someone is feeling the same and will find in your words the sign they've been waiting for. Like if this touched a part of you you rarely show. And subscribe if you want to continue exploring the soul, love, and the invisible mysteries that connect us. Together, we can make this message reach more people who, like you, know that destiny does leave signs. You just have to be willing to see them. Carl Jung's most daring discovery was not about mental illness, but about those who could perceive what others ignored, and the reason why this eventually destroyed them. In his clinical practice, Jung documented cases of patients who displayed what he described as differentiated perception. These were individuals able to read micro-expressions, feel hidden emotions, and detect psychological patterns invisible to everyone else. They saw through social masks, detected lies instantly, and sensed unconscious tensions in every room they entered. Jung considered this discovery dangerous because such people consistently ended up isolated, exhausted, and unable to sustain ordinary relationships. It was not because they were unstable, but because seeing everything came with a psychological cost no one could understand. Today, I will show you Jung's most dangerous discovery about those who see it all, and why he believed this rare ability either destroys you or transforms you into something extraordinary. The case that revealed this discovery began in 1913, during Jung's own psychological crisis after his break with Freud. When he encountered a patient he later described in his private notes as an introverted, intuitive type. This patient, whom Jung eventually classified as one of the rarest personality types, possessed what he called undifferentiated, intuitive perception. She could enter any room and instantly feel its psychological atmosphere. Who was lying? Who was in emotional pain? Who carried hidden resentments? Jung wrote, The patient shows an extraordinary capacity to perceive unconscious contents in others, yet this ability causes her considerable distress rather than advantage. She could not sustain small talk because she saw through every social facade. She could not maintain friendships because people felt exposed and uncomfortable around her. She could not keep employment because her mere presence disrupted the unconscious agreements that allow groups to function. Jung realized he was not dealing with pathology. He was witnessing what happens when the unconscious becomes too conscious, when perception grows too differentiated for social survival. He documented how she described others with astonishing accuracy. She spoke of people as though she had access to their private thoughts and hidden motivations. When he carefully verified her observations, they turned out to be remarkably precise. This was neither psychosis nor delusion. It was a consciousness so advanced that it had become socially dangerous. But Jung discovered something even more disturbing. Because this extraordinary perception seemed impossible to explain, he began exploring what he would later call participation mystique, the psychological phenomenon in which individuals with highly differentiated intuition are overwhelmed by the unconscious contents of others. In his Red Book, Jung noted, "There are among us people whose psychic apparatus is so finely attuned that they absorb not only conscious communication, but the entire unconscious atmosphere of their surroundings." Modern research on highly sensitive people validates Jung's early observations. Studies reveal that about 20% of the population has heightened sensory and emotional sensitivity. Yet Jung identified something far more specific in his psychological typology: the introverted intuitive type, representing roughly 1% of the population, who not only feel deeply but also perceive unconscious patterns with startling clarity. Jung observed that such individuals possess what he called a differentiated intuitive function. Their minds process not only obvious social signals, but also unconscious emotional states, repressed material, and psychological patterns others cannot detect. They see depression behind forced smiles. They feel despair beneath confident presentations. They sense the collective shadow that groups unconsciously agree to ignore. Jung wrote, "The danger lies not in the perception itself, but in the psychic isolation it creates. When one sees clearly what others cannot or will not see, one becomes a mirror in which society cannot bear to look at itself." This creates what Jung called the problem of the superior function, when one's greatest strength becomes one's greatest burden, because it separates the individual from collective unconscious participation. Yet Jung discovered that the real danger was not the perception itself, because those with highly differentiated perception see unconscious contents so clearly, they often become the target of shadow projection, as Jung extensively documented, where people unconsciously attack those who reflect what they refuse to recognize within themselves. Jung wrote in Psychology of the Unconscious, "Nothing has a stronger psychological influence on the environment, and especially on children, than the unlived life of the parent." But he realized this principle extended to all relationships. When someone's shadow is reflected through another's clear perception, the unconscious mind faces two choices: integrate the shadow or attack the mirror. Jung repeatedly documented this pattern in his clinical work. The one who sees clearly is blamed for creating the very problems they are simply observing. His patients with differentiated intuition experienced this constantly. When they gently suggested someone seemed troubled, that person would explode, accusing them of being negative or creating drama. When they expressed concern over obvious issues, They were accused of being critical or inventing problems that did not exist. Jung realized this was not coincidence. It was psychological defense. In Memories, Dreams, Reflections, he wrote, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. Yet for most people, it is easier to attack the person who reflects their shadow than to examine what is being reflected." This created what Jung called the scapegoat phenomenon. Highly perceptive individuals often became the designated problem in every group they entered, not because they caused disturbances, but because they revealed disturbances already present in the collective unconscious. Jung observed, "The bearer of higher perception becomes the repository of all that the group cannot consciously acknowledge about itself." This pattern explained why such individuals not only felt misunderstood, but systematically attacked by a force they could not rationally explain. Yet Jung's most unsettling discovery was still ahead. He found that overwhelming perception manifested differently across individuals. He identified 4 distinct patterns within the introverted intuitive type, each representing a different way of processing the unconscious contents of others. Type 1. The feeling intuitive. Jung described individuals who combined introverted intuition with a differentiated feeling function. These individuals not only perceived what was unfolding psychologically, but also felt it directly within their own bodies. They absorbed the emotions of others so completely that they often could not distinguish between their own feelings and those unconsciously absorbed. Jung wrote, "The feeling intuitive lives in a state of perpetual emotional contagion, experiencing the unlived emotions of everyone in their surroundings." Type 2. The thinking intuitive. These individuals detected psychological patterns and predicted behavioral outcomes with astonishing precision. Jung observed that they could foresee the collapse of relationships, the downfall of careers, and the eruption of personal crises months before they occurred, not through logical analysis, but through the recognition of unconscious patterns. Jung noted, "They possess a strange ability to perceive the logical conclusions of unconscious processes that others are still unable to see." Type 3. The sensory intuitive. Jung documented people who could feel the physical manifestations of psychological states in others, detecting illness before symptoms appeared, sensing fatigue before it was recognized, or feeling bodily tension that revealed hidden emotional distress. Jung wrote, "These individuals serve as early warning systems for psychological and physical illness in their surroundings." Type 4. The pure intuitive. The rarest type Jung encountered, they combined introverted intuition with what he called an undifferentiated auxiliary function. They saw everything, yet struggled to organize or express their perceptions coherently. Jung observed that they lived in a state of perpetual overwhelm, receiving vast amounts of unconscious information without the proper psychological structure to process it constructively. Understanding your specific pattern is crucial because each type requires different approaches to what Jung called the challenge of integration. But first, you must understand why Jung regarded this discovery as dangerous. He observed the devastating effects of undifferentiated perception in his patients and concluded that perceiving everything without proper integration posed genuine dangers for both individual and collective well-being. Jung identified 3 specific dangers that made this discovery so threatening. Danger 1. The disruption of the collective unconscious. Jung wrote, "The individual who perceives too clearly threatens the collective agreements upon which social cohesion depends. When someone sees through the shared illusions that bind groups together, the tacit agreements to ignore certain truths, that person becomes a destabilizing force. He observed that organizations, families, and societies function partly through collective unconscious agreements about what will be acknowledged and what will not. The highly perceptive individual inadvertently violates these agreements simply by existing authentically. Danger 2. Psychological isolation. Jung documented how differentiated perception creates what he called the problem of the superior function, when your greatest psychological strength becomes the source of your deepest suffering. He wrote, "The curse of consciousness is that it cannot be shared with those who do not possess it." The individual becomes an island of awareness in an ocean of unconsciousness. This isolation is not only social, but existential. These individuals often report feeling as though they are living in a different reality from everyone around them. Danger 3. The dissolution of identity. The most perilous phenomenon Jung discovered was that people who absorb the unconscious contents of others often lose contact with their authentic personality. They become so flooded with external psychological material that they can no longer distinguish their own inner world from what they are absorbing. Jung called this participation mystique, a state in which psychological boundaries dissolve and the individual fuses with the collective unconscious contents. He wrote, "The danger is not merely social exile, but psychological annihilation, the complete loss of individual identity in favor of collective possession." For this reason, Jung considered the integration of heightened perception not only therapeutically important, but psychologically urgent. Because unintegrated higher perception posed such dangers, Jung developed what he called the process of individuation, a systematic approach to preserving individual identity while forming a conscious relationship with unconscious contents. The first phase is recognition and differentiation. Jung taught his highly perceptive patients to recognize when they were absorbing psychological material that did not belong to them. He called this conscious discrimination, the ability to distinguish between authentic inner experience and externally absorbed content. He wrote, "The first task is to establish what belongs to you and what belongs to others. Without this discrimination, there can be no individual development." As a technique, he instructed patients to spend daily periods in complete solitude, allowing absorbed material to settle so they could hear their own authentic psychological voice. The second phase is shadow integration. Jung discovered that those who saw the shadows of others so clearly often did so because they had not integrated their own. The more you deny your own capacity for deceit, selfishness, or cruelty, the more disturbing it becomes to see these qualities in others. Jung wrote, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves, but only if we have the courage to look within, instead of remaining outwardly focused." Integrating the shadow means recognizing that you contain every human quality you observe in others. This does not make you a bad person. It makes you whole, capable of seeing clearly and without judgment. The final phase involves what Jung called conscious participation in the collective unconscious, the ability to engage with the psychological contents of others without being overwhelmed or losing your own identity. Jung wrote, "The individuated person can serve as a bridge between the conscious and the unconscious, helping to bring unconscious material to awareness in others without sacrificing their own psychological integrity." This requires developing what Jung called psychological containers, the ability to hold the unconscious material of others temporarily while maintaining the awareness that it is not your own. Jung understood that heightened perception either destroys or transforms individuals. He studied historical figures to understand the difference between successful integration and psychological collapse. In his analysis, he observed how those who failed to integrate their extraordinary perception became consumed by it, while those who succeeded transformed it into spiritual depth and psychological wholeness. He concluded that the difference lay not in the perception itself, but in whether it was consciously integrated into a balanced personality. But unlike Nietzsche, Hart directed his insights toward compassionate service. Jung wrote, Hart transformed his higher perception into wisdom that could nourish others without overwhelming them. He saw with clarity, yet spoke in ways that invited understanding rather than resistance. Jung observed that his success came from what he described as conscious humility, the recognition that higher perception is a gift to be shared wisely, not a weapon to be wielded. Jung's own journey of integration was the most significant. He documented his struggle with overwhelming perception during what he described as his confrontation with the unconscious from 1913 to 1919. Recorded in the Red Book, he wrote, I was threatened by psychosis and survived only because of my ability to understand what was happening to me through my work with patients. His higher perception of unconscious contents, both his own and those of others, nearly destroyed him until he learned to integrate such experiences consciously. His great breakthrough came when he realized that these overwhelming perceptions were not pathological, but evolutionary. They represented consciousness attempting to evolve beyond current collective limitations. This revelation transformed his approach toward others with similar gifts. Since individuals with heightened perception often face isolation, Jung emphasized the crucial importance of finding the few who understand, those able to relate to differentiated awareness without becoming defensive. He wrote in The Development of Personality, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But this privilege cannot be realized in isolation. It requires the witness of those capable of recognizing authenticity. He identified 3 types of essential relationships for the highly perceptive individual. Type 1. Others who are individuated. He wrote, the individuated person recognizes another individuated person immediately. There is a quality of presence, an authenticity that cannot be manufactured. These connections often occur instantly and intensely. You recognize one another as members of what he called the conscious minority. Such relationships are rare but essential for psychological survival. With other individuated beings, one can be completely authentic, without fear of overwhelming or threatening them. Type 2. Those in the process of individuation. Jung observed that people actively engaged in their own individuation, therapy, inner work, spiritual practice, can often handle higher perception without becoming defensive. They may not possess it themselves, but they understand its value. He wrote, those who have begun to know themselves can endure being known by others. Type 3. Natural containers. He described individuals who, although they lack higher perception, have what he called a natural containing function, the capacity to hold psychological content without being overwhelmed. They might be mature individuals who have overcome significant life challenges. For recognition, Jung developed specific indicators to identify safe relationships. They ask genuine questions about your observations instead of immediately defending against them. They can acknowledge their own contradictions and limitations without shame. They demonstrate what Jung called psychological mindedness, an interest in inner reality. They maintain emotional stability when confronted with uncomfortable truths and show genuine curiosity about consciousness and growth. He taught a careful protocol of gradual disclosure for sharing perceptive abilities. First, begin with small and kind observations. Second, watch their response patterns. Third, assess whether they grow defensive or curious. Fourth, increase depth gradually according to the capacity they demonstrate. Fifth, always frame perceptions as offerings rather than proclamations. Jung emphasized, the goal is not to find people who accept everything you see, but people who can engage with your perceptions as valuable contributions to understanding rather than threats to their self-image. Integrated higher perception serves both individual and collective development. Therefore, Jung saw successful individuation as essential not only for personal well-being, but for the evolution of human consciousness itself. He wrote in The Undiscovered Self, the individual has always been the bearer of the living spirit, the one who brings change to society. He believed that those who integrate higher perception become what he called culture bearers, people who help consciousness evolve. The 4 stages of transformation are: Stage 1, recognition without collapse. The first transformation occurs when you learn to recognize your perceptive abilities without being crushed by them. He called this the conscious acceptance of the higher function. The beginning of wisdom is the recognition of what one truly is, not what one wishes or fears to be. Stage 2, integration without isolation. The second stage involves learning to use perception constructively while maintaining meaningful relationships. He called this social individuation, becoming authentically yourself while still connected to others. The individuated person does not withdraw from the world, but relates to it more consciously. Stage 3, service without sacrifice. The third transformation occurs when your perception becomes a gift you offer rather than a burden you carry. He called this conscious participation, using abilities in the service of others without depleting yourself. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are and then offer that authentic self to serve the whole. Stage 4, legacy without attachment. The final stage involves what Jung called the transcendent function, using perception to contribute to the evolution of collective consciousness without attaching to whether others recognize or accept your contributions. He observed, the individuated person works for the future, not for personal recognition in the present. Integration becomes cultural medicine. He believed that those who integrate higher perception fulfill a vital evolutionary role. They see what collective consciousness is not yet ready to recognize, helping prepare humanity for necessary developmental steps. Jung wrote, "What is not brought to consciousness comes to us as fate." Highly perceptive individuals who learn integration help make unconscious contents conscious before they manifest destructively in collective behavior. But he warned of specific pitfalls that can derail this transformation. The path of integrating higher perception contains real dangers, and he documented the most common ways individuals sabotage their own development. The first trap is inflation. He wrote extensively about psychological inflation. It occurs when individuals identify with their higher function rather than integrate it consciously. He warned, the danger is that the ego identifies with the archetype, leading to inflation that isolates the individual from human relationships. Highly perceptive individuals often fall into what Jung called the prophet complex, believing they must save everyone from unconsciousness. This leads to preaching, judgment, and eventual isolation. The moment one believes oneself bearer of absolute truth, one has fallen into the trap of unconscious possession by the very forces one seeks to understand. The second trap is justification of withdrawal. Jung documented cases where individuals used higher perception to justify complete retreat from society, convincing themselves that others were too unconscious to deserve attention, a form of spiritual superiority disguised as wisdom. True individuation requires engagement with the unconscious world, not escape from it. The hermit who withdraws from life has not transcended it, but been defeated by it. The third pitfall is the helper's trap. He observed that some highly perceptive individuals become addicted to being needed, defining themselves entirely through their ability to see and assist others, losing touch with their own inner development. When perception becomes identity, the person disappears behind the function. This is not individuation, but its opposite, the sacrifice of personality to role. The fourth trap is the return of overwhelm. Even successfully integrated individuals can regress during times of stress, trauma, or major life transitions, failing to maintain psychological boundaries and becoming flooded again by unconscious contents of others. Jung emphasized, integration is not a permanent achievement, but a dynamic process requiring constant conscious attention. For maintenance of integration, he developed continuous practices, regular solitude to distinguish your own psychological contents from absorbed material, conscious choice of when and with whom to use perceptive abilities, ongoing shadow work to avoid projecting unconscious material, connection with others able to provide reality testing and support, and creative expression as an outlet for overwhelming perceptual information. He wrote, "The integrated person does not attain perfection, but learns to dance consciously with their own psychological complexity." He understood higher perception in the context of collective psychological development. Therefore, he saw highly perceptive individuals as fulfilling an essential evolutionary function for human consciousness. In The Undiscovered Self, he wrote, "The individual has always been the bearer of the living spirit, the one who brings change to society." He believed that those with higher perception serve as what he called pioneers of consciousness, individuals whose psychological development precedes collective readiness. He observed that throughout history, highly perceptive individuals often appeared before collective consciousness was prepared to integrate their insights. They served as advanced scouts of psychological territories humanity would eventually need to explore. What first appears in the individual as psychological vision later manifests in the collective as cultural transformation. The individual serves as a laboratory for experiments of consciousness that eventually benefit the whole. He believed that in the modern era, highly perceptive individuals may sense psychological patterns explaining collective behavior, environmental and social unsustainability before it becomes obvious, spiritual possibilities beyond current religious frameworks, technological implications others have not yet considered, and collective shadow contents requiring conscious integration. His intuition was that the sensitive individual feels collective problems first and most intensely. Their personal symptoms often mirror what the entire culture must address. Jung's crucial idea was that higher perception best serves evolution when consciously integrated rather than unconsciously suffered. The goal is not to become a martyr of consciousness, but a bridge between what is and what is coming. The individuated person serves the collective not by sacrificing individuality, but by developing it so fully that it becomes a gift to the whole. At the highest level of development, Jung observed that individuals with higher perception hold their abilities lightly, seeing clearly without clinging to others, accepting what they perceive, and engaging deeply without compulsion to fix everything they see. He called this the transcendent function, the capacity to serve the evolution of consciousness naturally, without forcing or preaching, simply by embodying more conscious ways of being. Your higher perception is not a flaw in your psychological makeup. It is an advanced feature of the development of consciousness. You are not broken because you see what others overlook. You are psychologically ahead of your time. The question is not whether you should suppress your perception to fit into collective unconsciousness. The question is whether you will develop the individuating skills required to integrate your perception consciously. The method of individuation offers a path from dangerous isolation to conscious service, from overwhelming perception to integrated wisdom, from psychological curse to evolutionary contribution. You were born to see it all, not to suffer in silence, but to serve the evolution of consciousness. The world needs your perceptions, but it needs them delivered with integration, wisdom, and strategic awareness that transforms dangerous perception into cultural medicine. Your gift is not your burden. Your unconscious relationship with your gift is your burden. Learn to integrate it consciously, and you will become exactly what Jung believed highly perceptive individuals were meant to be. Pioneers of consciousness, preparing humanity for psychological development that is inevitable but not yet visible. The most dangerous discovery was not that some people see everything, but that most who see everything never learn to use what they see wisely. The danger does not lie in perception itself, but in failing to develop a conscious relationship with extraordinary capacities. You are not too much for this world. You are exactly what the evolution of consciousness requires. Once you learn to handle your perception as consciously as Jung learned to handle his. The danger of seeing it all is not that you see too much, but that you may never learn to see with the integration and wisdom your gifts demand.